that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. So now we're going to say, for anybody who is tuning in on channel 8, that we're going to have, this is a very interesting thing that Thomas and Jake are doing, which is a challenge for Brattleboro and the Brattleboro area. And I think the first thing that we should do is say this challenge involves heat pumps.
Correct.
And a lot of people have got no idea what a heat pump is. A lot of people have heat pumps. And in fact, if you think about it,
Pretty
almost
much
everybody has
Yeah.
a heat pump. If you have an air conditioner in your car, if you have a refrigerator, do you know anybody who doesn't have a refrigerator? I have, actually, but not right
recently.
Now. Not recently. If you have an air conditioner, a refrigerator, or a freezer, you've got a heat pump of sorts. But this is a different kind of heat pump. This is a heat pump that delivers heat.
Yeah, so when we talk about heat pumps, probably the first thing we should do is distinguish between ground source heat pump and air source heat pump.
Okay.
So a heat pump is a device that moves heat from one place to another. So a ground source heat pump, also called or known as geothermal heat pump, extracts heat from the ground and delivers it to your home in the wintertime. An air source heat pump extracts heat from the outside air and heats the house. And in both of these, it uses the refrigerant cycle and a compressor to extract heat even when the temperature either of the ground or the outside air is below the temperature in the house. Mm-hmm. And this technology, as you mentioned, is very similar to what you would see in a refrigerator, where the refrigerator is able to keep your food cooler than your house. Mm-hmm. That's an example of a heat pump cooling. Mm-hmm. A heat pump in reverse does heating. So we've got a photo here of a heat pump. On the left there, you see the outside unit, and then in the center there, you see the remote control and the indoor unit. So
what you in the center there is what you're going to see in your apartment.
Yes.
That's right.
Yep. Yeah. So to give you a sense of size, the indoor unit there is about 3 feet wide and about 1 foot tall, and it sticks out from the wall about 10 or 12 inches, depending on the
Typically
size.
up by the ceiling.
That's right.
Yeah. Often you'll put them above a window or a door, sort of at that height, so that they're out of the way and you don't bump into them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other unit is put outdoors.
That's right.
Yep. The other unit sits outside the house, and they're connected by piping. So the outdoor unit is about 2.5 feet wide. You can see the dimensions there. About 2.5 feet tall, and about 16 inches thick, roughly.
So another name for this, besides air source heat pump, is either mini split or ductless heat pump, ductless. And the reason it's called a ductless heat pump is because it uses no ducts. So it's not centralized, it's zonal, which makes it dramatically more efficient for a couple of reasons. One is you're not heating rooms that you don't need to be heating if you're not in them. And two, you lose upwards of 30% of heating in a centralized unit as the heat passes through the ducts and actually seeps out through cracks. So this only heats the place that you're trying to heat it. So the unit itself is very efficient, but the fact that it's ductless also creates tremendous efficiencies.
Okay. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to step away from the technology just a little bit.
Yep.
The bottom line on the technology is that it's pretty much like an air conditioner that's been turned around.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Correct.
the at least when you're heating with it, because you can also air condition with it.
Absolutely. It's a
that's
great
right.
and a dehumidifier. It's a great
Yeah.
dehumidifier.
Now, the thing that I want to do is I want to talk about the economics of this thing to the homeowner.
Right.
So
So the bottom line, the reason we're talking about this and the reason we think it's a great option for Vermont homes is that it saves money. So a heat pump, what it does is it uses electricity to move heat from one place to another. So go back to the technical just for a second here. So when you think about your oil or your propane boiler or furnace, it's burning fuel, right? And that creates heat that's then distributed throughout the house. So by definition, it has to be less than 100% efficient.
Right.
What a heat pump is doing is not burning a fuel. It's using a little bit of energy to move heat from one place to another. So 1 unit of electricity into a heat pump will provide you with 3 units of heat on average throughout the winter.
Right. Which means that if you compare this with a resistance heater in a house, you'll get 3 times as much heat for the same amount of electricity.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Right.
And when you compare it to propane or fuel oil, what you see is that there are huge savings.
Yeah.
So electricity, if you just have electric resistance heat, it's about the same cost as oil at $4 a gallon.
Right.
But what we just said is a heat pump is 3 times more efficient than electric resistance. So what we're seeing is, oil at $4 a gallon, a heat pump can deliver similar heating for the equivalent of about $1.50 a gallon.
Now, my own experience last year was I have an apartment which is very well insulated. It's very well sealed, and I was running on propane, and the propane company was not very happy with me because my apartment was so well insulated and well sealed, and I had the thermostat turned down in addition to that. And the result of that was that I was not going to use 100 gallons of propane for the whole winter. So I had to pay $5.50 a gallon for the propane.
Oh, that's terrible.
Okay. It was pretty bad.
That's rough.
So at that point, the point when I got my first bill, I said to myself, well, wait a minute. How does this compare with resistance heating? It's nice to be able to do some math.
Yep.
But if you can't do math, there are people who will help you. And if you call up, people who know how to do this kind of thing, and there are a lot of them around, they can do it, but I could do my own, and I very quickly came to the conclusion that at $4 a gallon, it was cheaper for me to use resistance heaters.
Yep.
And I had 2 of them that were just sitting there. So why not use them? And as a matter of fact, it was my electricity all comes from cow power, from Green Mountain Power. I'm gonna try to change that because I want to go to solar. But the result of that was that I just shut my furnace off altogether and had a single resistance heater, and that was heating my apartment. And I was saving a lot of money. Now, here's the deal. Having already saved a lot of money by going from propane to resistance heating, I could have saved 2/3 of what I was spending by having a heat pump.
That's right.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So the other calculation that I have come across, and this is not mine, it's one that comes from a guy who he wasn't selling heat pumps. He was actually just an expert in home heating. He told me that a heat pump will produce heat for a house at approximately the same cost as cordwood.
That's right. Yep.
Except, of course, you don't have to bring powder post beetles into your house, and you don't have to smoke wood, and you don't have to carry things around, you don't have to clean your chimney, and you don't have to clean out the ashes. And there's a bunch of other
And
things.
you can go on vacation.
And you can go on.
But you don't get the workout.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you
have to
can
find
get the
other ways
workout
to get
another
the
way.
work.
Sell your car, buy a bicycle.
Yeah. Yeah. So this chart that we have up here is from Efficiency Vermont. It's a great graphic that shows 5 different types of fuels that you could use to heat your home. So on the left there, you've got electric resistance, and then propane, oil, pellets, and cordwood.
Okay.
And on that, one of the columns on the left there, you see annual savings, second one up from the bottom. So this is saying, what could you save using a heat pump compared to these 5 different fuels?
Okay.
So on the left there, you see, if you went from electric resistance, and this is for an average Vermont home using these fuels.
Yes.
So that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
So if you're using electric resistance and you switch to heat pumps, and this is, again, I should say, if you're switching 80% of your usage from what you're using now to a heat pump. So you're still going to use some oil or propane or electric resistance, but you're switching 80% of your load.
Right.
So $1,800 savings with electric resistance.
Per year.
Per year.
Per year.
For an ordinary family.
Correct.
Yeah, that's for a
So
Vermont
if
home.
you've got baseboard electric, and you say heat pump, you're going to save $1,842 a year.
That's the average home.
as an
So
average home.
it's obviously, you know,
Some are
savings
going to be
vary.
more, and some are going to be less.
So the average lifetime savings
Yes.
is almost $30,000.
Which you could throw a heck of a party with.
Crazy party, get your workout that way.
Yeah. You could do a lot of things with $30,000.
These things give it to me. These things last 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Good thing to know.
So the idea is you take that almost $2,000 in savings and you multiply it by 15 years.
Right.
Yep. And then, so going down the list there, propane, next most expensive fuel, as you saw last year, $1,200 a year in savings.
Yeah, but it's not $2.95 a gallon anywhere anymore in Vermont.
Absolutely.
So
this is a
You
conservative.
said it was almost double that. So
Yeah.
then the savings for you would have been almost $2,500 a year.
Right, and which means, you know, again, we're talking about resistance heating being cheaper than propane. And of course, I don't know what the cost of oil is now either. But
Yeah, so this was less than $4 a gallon oil, but still you're talking savings, you know, approaching $900 a year. And as you mentioned at the beginning, similar cost to cordwood. So what you see here is a heat pump is very similar in operating cost to a pellet stove,
Yes,
and slightly more expensive than cordwood.
actually, the guy I was talking to was talking, I think, with more recent data than this.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he told me that it was slightly less than pellets.
So the
and,
unit.
similar to cordwood.
Well, the other thing I think that's important to think about here is, you know, the only fuel up here that stays relatively constant year to year is electricity.
Yes,
Propane, oil, pellets, cordwood, you see those prices moving all over the place,
that's right. Yep. And of course, writing for Green Energy Times, I do a lot of work with writing about buildings. And the passive house, of course, is a house that uses no heat at all.
Right.
And that's expensive. But I have talked to contractors who said we can get 90% of the way to a passive house for the same price as an ordinary house, which means that for paying the same price for the house, you can cut 90% of the cost of
Yeah.
heat. The thing that a lot of these guys are doing is they're saying, okay, we don't want to do that. What we want to do is have a house that is net zero. We're not going to worry about theories here. We're going to
Yep.
worry about impacts. And to go to net zero, they say, okay, we're going to put a heat pump in because the heat pump combined with solar is cheaper than that extra 10% of going. So you can have a relatively small heat pump supplying a relatively large house at a low cost in terms of solar input.
So you're driving the heat pump with solar.
You're driving the heat pump with solar.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can have that with a grid tie, net metering, or you can do it without it with a battery backup. Of course, the one thing is you're going to want to have some kind of backup power, just like any power system that depends on electricity. But most people don't think about that. You know, they just,
Yep. Yeah. So that's an important point as well. So heat pumps work down to below or in the range of -10 Fahrenheit. Below that, you do need a backup. So the idea is you keep the system that you have, whether it's electric resistance, propane, oil, pellets, cordwood. You add a heat pump. The heat pump becomes your primary source of heat. You could try to get 80% of your heating from the heat pump.
Yeah.
And then on the coldest days, the other fuel that you have acts as the backup.
yep.
So so the idea is you've got this really efficient piece of equipment. You use it the most. You use your inefficient, expensive stuff just a little bit when you have to.
Yeah.
Real cold snap around Martin Luther King Day.
Right. Yeah. And you hope it doesn't get that cold.
Yeah, but it does sometimes, and so
Yep.
it's nice to be prepared. But I'm amazed at the efficiency of these things. You know, the idea of having something that's running, taking heat out of the 10 degree below air outside, and moving that heat into the house and keeping the house warm.
Seems like magic.
It does seem like magic,
Yep.
but if you think about it, it's no different from an air conditioner, which is taking the heat of the house and putting it into the very much warmer air outside and pumping it in the opposite direction. It's,
right.
it's quite a miracle. So, yes.
So sort of think about real world results here. You mentioned the idea of combining solar and heat pumps. I have a friend that got solar in 2009 and added 2 heat pumps to his house about 2 years later, so that would have been 2011. Ran them for a year, went from using 500 gallons of kerosene down to 0 that winter, and then realized that he needed a little bit more solar, so we added an additional 4 panels. And so for the last year and a half or so, he's been totally solar, and he built up credit all summer. He's net metered, built up credit all summer, and then uses it in the winter, and no kerosene.
Yeah.
He keeps it. It's there as a backup if he needs it, but he hasn't used any in the
Well,
last
I
year
think
and a
any
half.
heating system, it's wise to have a backup.
Well, that's the nice thing about a heat pump, which is that you don't touch the core system. It's simply something you put on the outside of the house that links very easily into the inside blower unit.
Yep.
So you're not removing the ducted system or the boiler or whatever you already have there. So it's always there if you need it. But this should offset roughly 80% of your need, or up to 100% like Thomas's friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you guys have got a plan.
We do.
Yeah.
I want you to tell me about the plan.
Sure. So traditionally, heat pumps have really improved in efficiency over time, particularly cold weather heat pumps.
Okay.
Which is part of the reason why the numbers on the screen are even better now, because the unit is even more efficient.
Yes.
The challenge is there is an upfront cost to installing these things.
Well.
And so, of course, that's always the challenge, right?
Yeah.
So what Thomas and I are attempting to do is to lower the installed cost of heat pumps to the homeowner. And we're trying to do that through something we're calling the Brattleboro Challenge.
Okay.
And essentially what we're trying to do is group homeowners in Brattleboro and the Brattleboro area together so that we can make a bulk purchase of heat pumps from manufacturers like Mitsubishi, the top tier manufacturer for these things, and secure cheaper prices than people buying them individually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to give you a sense for pricing, we have a fixed price sheet that we can share. The price to install one heat pump today, it varies based upon the home and the size of the heat pump you're installing, but it's roughly $5,000 anywhere up to almost $7,000. Just to prove, just to get a sense as to the market currently, Thomas and I got a quote from an installer that's not affiliated with us to understand what the average market rate was to install in Thomas's home in Vermont. And that quote came in at $6,500.
Okay.
Through this aggregated purchasing process, the idea that we're trying to get everyone together, we're planning to install for $2,000 less than that, for roughly $4,500.
So you're talking about about 30% off.
Drastic savings.
Yeah.
So you're saving on the purchase of the unit, and you're saving on the installation.
Exactly.
Of both purposes.
Because we're grouping them both together.
Yeah.
How
So
much of the cost of the installation is the actual unit?
So the unit is the unit and all the hardware that goes with it, the piping and the electrical, is in the range of $2,300, $2,500.
Okay.
And the rest of that is installation, a couple different things.
So if a person goes to his computer and says, how much does a heat pump cost? And he sees a price of $2,000 and says, these guys are talking about much more than that.
Right.
What he's first of all looking at is possibly the heat pump unit plus the one of the, what are the units inside the house called?
There's indoor and outdoor units.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but-
you're looking, if you look at $2,500, you're missing.
It's the what?
The outdoor unit is is where the compressor is,
Yes.
the condenser,
Yeah.
and then the evaporator.
Evaporator, it's called. Okay.
And the
We
blower.
usually just say the indoor and the outdoor
Yeah,
unit.
okay. But
There's so I think what you're asking is there's a whole series of other things you have to buy. So there's what's called a line set, which is actually getting the fluid from the outside to the inside.
Yes.
There's all of the drilling equipment and essentially the things you have to put around the hole. There's a bracket stand, and then there's all the electrical equipment, including the wiring.
Right.
Then there's the installation, right, which is a whole other thing.
Which is not that big a deal, actually, as I understand it. It's a few hours, but it doesn't really ruin your week.
It's not a week, certainly. It is a day.
Yeah,
It's
it's a day.
generally you could say it's going to take 2 people, and obviously it varies a lot based on the house, right?
Yes.
It could be in the range of 5 to 8 hours, something
Okay.
like that for 2 people.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
This is probably a little bit too specialized to think of anything like a barn raising.
So I would definitely say it is.
Yeah.
I have installed solar and I've installed spray foam and cellulose because I had a business doing that for 4 years. I wouldn't say it's extremely difficult. It's not brain surgery. Installing solar is easier than installing a heat pump.
Mm-hmm.
Installing solar is easier than installing a heat pump. Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case. So
and in particular, there are two things that you need to be aware of. One, you need to do wiring.
Yes.
You know, it's single phase, but it's 240 volts.
Right.
So you're talking about a decent size electrical appliance. You don't want to be messing with that.
This is you can get zapped by that.
You don't want to get zapped by that. You certainly can. And the other thing is it has a refrigerant. That's how it transfers the heat.
Right.
And that's regulated by the EPA. You need a refrigerant certification to be able to install one of these.
Which means this is not a home.
It is not.
Do-it-yourself
you
thing.
could try it, but it's not advised and it's illegal.
Yeah.
So,
Minor little thing.
yeah.
It's kind of like running your own mint, or
Yes.
Yeah, you can think of many things, or still, or so. It's not brain surgery, but it's also, you know, it requires professional certifications to install.
Which is why what we've done is partnered with certified installers in the
Right.
area. Thomas mentioned he ran a business installing solar panels before school, and so has a network of contractors that he's worked with closely.
good idea.
And so the good news is we've tapped back into that network for this business,
Right.
and we're working exclusively with certified installers. Thomas has worked with most of them himself, so we're very excited about the full package we put together.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other nice thing about this is we take all the pain out of the process. So if I tell you today, if I were to say, Tom, get a heat pump, you would say, how do I do it? First, you'd be like, yes, look at these numbers. This is a great deal.
Makes sense to me.
Then the next word is how. Like, how do you do it? Do you go on the internet and do you like try to buy one on the internet and then figure out all the other crap you have to buy to install it, and then you find an installer? How do you make sure they install it correctly? How do you maintain it? What's the warranty supposed to look like?
Right.
The nice thing about what we're doing is we're taking all of the choice out. We are doing all of that for you. So we've got the certified installer, we've got the top tier cold weather equipment. We're installing the very best equipment that
Mitsubishi
came
is
out.
good equipment from
This
what I understand.
particular unit came out literally 3 months ago. It is the top of the line 2014 model.
Okay.
The last model that came out was 2009. So this is like brand new stuff, which is why its efficiency is roughly 30% higher than ever the previous model.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which means the savings are even higher than the numbers on the page.
Right.
Yeah, so the number you want to think about when you think of efficiency
Yes.
is heating season performance factor,
Okay.
HSPF.
Yep.
It's a hard one for me to remember the order of. But
I won't do it.
heating season's performance factor. So what that is it's a rating that's based on a particular climate, and it's kind of like miles per gallon.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you that your car is going to get 30 miles per gallon going 10 miles an hour or 90. It gives you the average, right?
Right.
So what this is doing is saying, what's the average performance of this equipment
Right.
in this climate over the heating season?
Right.
So the newest Mitsubishi product, the FH series, comes in 3 different sizes. The heating season's performance factor is 12, which, if you don't know the numbers, it doesn't sound like all that earth-shattering. It's a huge improvement. So if you go into Home Depot and you just pick up, heat pump, it's going to be 7, 8, 9.
Right.
And so your savings are going to be nowhere near this.
Right. Now, I want to point out, it is possible for a person to buy a window-mounted heat pump,
Yes.
and
Yep.
and they're much cheaper than this.
Absolutely.
But they're not going to save you that money.
It's just like a window unit AC isn't
Yeah.
a very efficient way to cool your home either.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you buy your air conditioner, turn it around for the winter time.
So the nice thing about this, well, like physically flip it around. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tom, it won't work. And I
Yeah.
can tell you why. It's because it's not efficient.
Yeah.
It's not going to deliver hot air when it's
Yeah.
30 degrees out.
I mean, that's it, and that's the thing is there's 2 things going on. One is the fundamental efficiency of the equipment at any range,
Yes.
and then there's the operating range for it, right?
Yes.
So you could have something that's very efficient but doesn't work below 40 degrees. It's not going to do
Which
you
is
much
the way
good.
they were 40 years
Not
ago.
very long ago.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know, with the connections that I've got in various places, because I write for Green Energy Times, I know of contractors who will install ground source heat pumps, but will not install air source heat pumps because their advisors have had familiarity with old units.
They're living in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Living in the past.
Yeah, I mean, what's amazing is that, well, as I said before, the Mitsubishi line works down to -13. Fujitsu is very similar. I think they claim -15.
Yep.
But with the prices we're seeing for propane and fuel oil and electric resistance, a heat pump, these high efficiency units, are more cost effective all the way down to that minimum temperature.
Yes.
So they are
Yes.
more efficient and more cost effective even at -10 degrees Fahrenheit
Right.
than fuel oil or propane.
Right.
And as you said in the past, that wasn't true.
Yes.
So it's really an issue now or it's a situation where the technology has improved and fuel prices have come up to the
Yeah.
point where the entire operating range of the heat pump
Right.
is cheaper
Yep.
than fossil fuel.
And I want to return just a minute to the window-mounted unit, because those are significantly less expensive than what you're talking about.
Right.
But they're very much smaller. They're really only suitable for a single room, and they will require electrical service because they're not 110 units, and so. It is an option that a person who's going to put $4,000 or $5,000 into something really should shop around.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention they're there, and for one or two people out there, they might even be the best solution.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the downside of the window unit is that it's significantly less efficient
yes, I do.
at all
Yes.
temperatures,
Yes.
and so your savings, are going to be better than electric resist. You're going to have some savings with electric resistance,
Yes.
but you're not going to see anywhere near the savings.
Right.
And so you have to then ask yourself, are the savings big enough to justify, still the $500-600 cost of the window unit?
Right. Right. Well,
you're just
I think
talking-
the window units can cost a good deal more than that.
Yeah, I mean that would be the absolute cheapest.
The absolute cheapest.
Probably.
That's the Larry Moe and Curly manufacturing company.
Yeah, and then you have to ask yourself, is it worth spending $1,000 or $800 on something that's not going to really save me much when I can spend, it's a lot more, but $4,000 or $5,000
Yeah.
on something that's going to save me a lot of money?
Well, I think
And
there are
last 15
circumstances. Yeah, I think there are circumstances under which the window unit would be ideal, such as if you've got a house, you might have a larger heat pump for the house, but there's one room out there at the end, and you want to get heat to that one room, and you could use a resistance heater and just heat when it's. These are decisions that
Yeah.
are going to vary with people.
Absolutely.
But I think due diligence. People should do due diligence, and when they do,
Yep.
they're going to decide. They're going to know where to go.
What we'd advise is going to the Efficiency Vermont website,
Right.
because it's a nice neutral third party that's done research on this and compared cold weather heat pumps to other heating sources.
Yeah, except what I'm seeing here for figures is wrong.
So they're actually less positive on heat pumps than the new numbers should be.
That's right.
So if
Yeah.
anything,
And a person who's going to go to Efficiency Vermont should bear that in mind.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is more efficient than this heat pump.
Correct.
And what you're talking about is propane prices being higher than they are here. And my suspicion is that the savings that they would get from the Mitsubishi heat pumps are significantly greater. And actually, when you think about it, you look at the payoff on that item, which is what, $1842 in the first year. And how much were you planning on selling these heat pumps for?
the large unit will be roughly $4,500 for fully installed.
Which
plus
means that
warranty.
the payoff would be in 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, how much does a new oil furnace of comparable output cost? Do you know?
Well, you can't buy an oil furnace that's in the range of BTUs that these are.
Okay.
And that's because there are minimum sizes for. Well,
Yeah.
it's a tough thing to compare, I would say.
Okay.
An oil furnace, is going to be in a couple $1,000s, similar price range.
It's going to be in
But
similar price
your
range.
savings are zero.
Yes, I know that. What about propane? My propane unit is a really nice Rinnai unit, and I know that was not exactly free. It wasn't free, for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't buy it.
Yeah, I mean,
So you have to compare these things when you're putting this in. You have to think about you're replacing something that's there, and if you're going to replace that, you've got various choices.
yep.
It's almost like the solar debate, though, insofar as The propane, so you've already spent the money on the propane heating device, but the fuel, the ongoing operating costs is obviously drastically higher.
Right.
Whereas you do have to make an upfront investment to put a new heat pump in, but the operating costs will be drastically lower such that the payback period can be as short as 3 years.
Well, in my case, the propane unit, the Renai, will run for a couple of hours on a car battery with an inverter. It is my backup. And if I had a heat pump installed, that would be how I would use it, as a backup.
Yeah.
I have to have the propane anyway because I'm cooking with propane.
Sure. Yeah.
So this is a logical
Yeah, that makes sense.
situation.
And I don't think we're advising anyone to, just to be clear, to take out their existing heating unit.
No.
You want to
Well,
keep your
you've said
backup
that
in.
before, that you
want
wanna
to keep your
that
backup
in.
in.
Yeah.
There's literally no downside to doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have a backup.
Challenge.
The challenge. We're calling this the Brattleboro Challenge, and
Yes.
what we're challenging you to do, Brattleboro, in the greater Brattleboro area, is to secure this discounted pricing by coming together. And essentially, the goal we've set for you and for ourselves is that we want to get 25 heat pumps signed up in the next 25 days. So that challenge, that's the Brattleboro Challenge. Now the clock started on Monday, this past Monday. So what that means is that by August 1st, we need to have 25 heat pumps signed up in order to secure this pricing from the distributors and the installers. So you can think about it as a barn raising, not in the installation sense, but in the sense that we are truly trying to get everyone to come together and jointly benefit from that discounted pricing.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, people are already in this area are already familiar with exactly this kind of thing because of the solarized movement.
Yes.
Right.
Very similar to the solarized.
Very similar idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what you are doing, the two of you, with your organization, is you're just facilitating this.
Correct.
Correct.
And the installation would be done of Mitsubishi units, which everything I've read about these things is very positive about them. And people who have been licensed to do this specific kind of work.
Correct.
Because they have to be licensed in order to deal with the refrigerants.
Exactly.
In addition to, so what we're offering is the installation, the product, as well as a 5-year parts and labor warranty, which is built into that price.
Okay.
So we're essentially aggregating all these things together. We're purchasing the warranty as well and including that in the purchase price, such that the whole goal is to make this as painless as possible for the customer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Is there any financing available?
Good question. Thank you for asking that question.
Yep.
Yes, there is financing available
from
us.
from you.
So essentially, what we're offering is if, for whatever reason, the upfront cost is undoable for you, if you pass a credit check, and it's important to say that you need to pass a credit check, we are providing a no money down rental option. In other words, it's that you rent it for the length, you can call it a rental or a lease or however you want to describe it, but it's a long-term rental wherein you pay nothing up front, and then you pay a monthly fee based upon the size of the unit that you get, which will be significantly less than the amount you save on a monthly basis. And that monthly fee will pay off the unit over time and allow us to pay off.
and then there's a
our financing
purchase
costs.
at the end of that?
At the end, you own it.
At the end, so this is a rent to purchase.
Rent to own, yeah.
Rent to own.
Yep.
And so.
So let me just be
go
a
ahead.
little clear on that because this gets into legal issues around financing.
Okay.
So it's at the end of the equipment's life, the homeowner has the option to assume ownership.
And
I just have to say that because that's,
The legal issue.
okay, and how long is the period?
so we're doing 15 years.
So the person would have the option to buy after 15 years.
Correct.
They would have the option to assume ownership
Assume ownership
at no cost.
at no cost.
Thomas is our lawyer
No,
as well as our co-founder.
I am not a lawyer. I will not accept that distinction.
No, he's just an MBA.
Okay.
But so we hope that the whole goal, the reason we started this Brattleboro Challenge, and the name of our company, just if you get confused, the company's name is Glow Heat.
Yes.
And the specific, we're starting with Brattleboro. Thomas is from Vermont. We like this town. I've actually really enjoyed the time I've spent here so far. I'm excited to spend more time here.
How long have you been here?
We got here this morning. But it's been awesome. We went to the museum. We walked across the bridge. We had a great lunch at the Works. Like, it's actually been a really nice day. And we're spending
Are you planning on going to Solarfest?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Thomas has actually already been.
Yeah,
I've been
we had
quite a
the
few times.
people running, the head people of Solarfest down for one of our shows.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
So the bottom line is there is financing available.
All right. But if I wanted, for example, to get one of these things and finance it through, for example, VSECU, I would be able to do that. And it would be
absolutely, yeah.
Third-party financing.
From our perspective, that would be just a purchase.
Yeah.
And if you decide, if you can do a home equity, line of credit, a home equity loan, something like that, those rates are, historic lows right now.
Yeah.
So that's, that's a great option if you can do that.
Yeah. And they want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so the website is www.glowheat.com. So that's glowheat.com. You can go to the website and you can sign up here. And what that means is that someone from our team, Thomas or myself, will call you.
One of us.
And
You've seen them on television.
well, as you've seen on television, so you know what we look like.
As seen on TV.
As seen on TV. And we'll ask you a series of questions about your house to figure out if heat pumps really are the best decision for you. Once we do that, we'll ask you to take a couple pictures of the areas you want to install it. We'll take a look at that and make sure that the house really looks good, and then we'll come out there and take a look ourselves, and then we'll install it. The fastest way to get in touch with us is to call us, and the number is 802-451-0173. It's at the top of the website, 802-451-0173.
There you go.
There you go. Heat pumps. 25 and 25 days. Brattleboro. Got to come together for this. Got to come together for the heifers.
Well, 25 heat pumps seems like a reasonable goal.
Well, I guess the only downside is this is not the time of year you think about stuff like that.
Well, it's a good time to think about it.
It is a good time to think about it, but it's not human nature.
It's not human nature.
Yeah, I can tell you as an efficiency contractor for 4 years, I had folks, unfortunately, who would call me. And this happened for 2-3 years in a row. They'd call in June and say, I'm interested in having some insulation work done. I said, okay, great, let's do it. Oh, well, we want to wait until, August. I say, okay, well, but, just to let you know, that's when we start to get busy, right? Sure enough, August, September would come and they'd call and say, okay, we'd like to have you come next week and do that. And I'd say, sorry, we're now booked until January.
Yeah, right.
And then the next year, same conversation, same thing. So this is not the time that you think about it, but it's the time you should be thinking about it, because you want to get it installed before winter starts. You don't want to call the first time you get a freeze and find out that, the next availability is February.
Yeah.
So really, it pays, and that's part of the reason that we're able to get really good pricing is that it's summertime.
Right.
So there's contractors available.
There are people available.
The other thing to think about as I wandered the Brattleboro streets today is that it was really hot. Like it's hot today. I'm from Texas originally, and this is reasonably hot here today.
Humidity.
Perhaps it's humidity.
Yeah.
These things are air conditioners in reverse that also function as air conditioners and dehumidifiers.
And they're very good air conditioners.
They're great. They're great.
The highest efficiency air conditioning
Highest efficiency. So it isn't a replacement for the propane furnace or the oil furnace. It's a replacement for the propane furnace and the air conditioner.
Totally.
Right.
And you have to.
And the dehumidifier.
And the dehumidifier. And when you start putting all of those together, the installation cost looks more and more attractive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to get this a little bit better under my head here. You're certainly going to need one outdoor unit.
Correct.
How many indoor units will that drive, or how many do you need?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the highest efficiency units right now from Mitsubishi are paired 1-to-1. So you can only have one indoor unit. There are models available that can have one outdoor unit and multiple indoor units. The efficiency on those is lower.
So that depends upon the configuration of your living space.
Yeah, so if you have a one-to-one configuration, it works much better if you have a sort of an open floor plan in your house. If you have a lot of little rooms, this is not a great solution. As Jake mentioned, that's one of the things that when we talk to people, we want to get a sense of how the house is set up to know whether
And
this
how
is...
they live in it.
And how you live in it,
Very
right?
important.
If you have a section of the house that's a bunch of little rooms, but you're not using it in the winter, that's probably fine. It's not a big
Yeah.
deal. So often what you'll see, and in those Efficiency Vermont numbers, if you're going for 80% savings and you have, let's say a 2,000 square foot house, you'll probably have one on the first floor and you'll probably have one on the second floor. But if it's a smaller house or just one level and it's open, you might just have one.
Yeah.
And it depends, do you spend most of your time on the first floor? Or I think of my parents' house, I had brother and sister, 3 bedrooms on the second floor. None of us are living there anymore. They just put the thermostat down at the bottom and leave it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's what I do all the time.
yeah. So they don't,
But you
they
write
don't
for
really
the green
need a
energy
heat pump
times, so you're-
upstairs.
Right.
So they're just going with one, for example, in their house.
Although we are installing them in Thomas's parents' house the next week.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We bought them and are installing them in Thomas's parents' house.
They're excited.
Does that count as one of the 25?
Unfortunately, it does not. It does not.
No.
Because they were going to buy it anyway. So,
Okay.
meaning it's his parents. So they're
Yes,
gonna,
of course.
They're pretty excited about air conditioning. They've never had air conditioning.
Really?
God, from Texas, that's crazy for me to think about.
Yeah. How did you come about deciding on Brattleboro as the place to start this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I grew up in Manchester, and we looked at Rutland, and there's already been a push there with Green Mountain Power last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so we looked at a couple places to do this, and we wanted to get somewhere that we thought was large enough where we could actually hit our number or get a chance at it.
Yeah.
And Brattleboro seemed like the best option, in this part of the state. And I think also it's, Vermont has a reputation as being green, but I think Brattleboro also stands out in that
Well,
regard.
the people in Brattleboro have been very interested in energy,
Yeah,
partly because of Vermont Yankee.
right.
And they've been investigating the options. How do you get off nuclear power? Where are you going to go once you get there? For a long time, and I think they've thought about. We've had this. For example, we've had the Brattleboro Thermal Utility that was a couple of different organizations tried to start that would deliver heat for all over the town. And one of the things, as a matter of fact, one of the things that I've been pushing for is having a town utility or something like a town utility that would deliver electricity in the town, make electricity locally, partly because of energy security, so that if the grid goes down in a hurricane or whatever, we can keep going. But it dawned on me as I was doing the numbers on that in Brattleboro, in most of Brattleboro, a thermal utility would cost so much to install that it would be cheaper to build the electrical utility bigger and operate those parts basically with heat pumps. The
Yep.
cheapest form of heat for most of Brattleboro would be heat pumps.
Yeah.
And it's a great system because it doesn't have any of the drawbacks of the other systems that are equally priced.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you compare a heat pump to, say, a thermal utility or a ground source, I should say, an air source heat pump to a thermal utility or a ground source heat pump, and what you see is that this is a much better deal. It's much more cost effective.
I forget the figure that I heard for installing a thermal utility in Brattleboro, but I think my recollection is it was $30 million.
I don't remember even seeing a number. I knew it was going to be.
But
up there.
it was a huge number, and I thought, how in the world can you save money by investing $30 million in a thermal utility? And the answer I got was, well, you've got to think about this in terms of the fact that there are still people in Brattleboro today who are actually burning coal and oil, and there's all of these old systems that are in use, and the cost of replacing that unit, which is going to come up sooner or later, has to be thought about as you think about this huge investment. It makes it a whole lot cheaper for people to do that. And everybody ties into the thing and buys into it. But the reason why it's expensive is because you've got to dig up all the streets and you've got to lay in a huge pipe, not just a big pipe, but a huge pipe, which is very well insulated. And on the other hand, you could deliver a little bit more electric to people and they can use heat pumps. And the cost of the installation is minuscule by comparison.
Right.
But the cost of running it is not. Thermal utility could be good in terms of cost, but I mean, just to give you an idea, I talked to the people at Jenbacher, and the Jenbacher builds gigantic internal combustion machines. There's reciprocating in 20 cylinders, and the cylinders are like the size of 2 liters each, or something.
Like you see in a ship.
Yeah, just gigantic machines. And the largest ones that they're now selling in the United States, they've just upped the largest size, is almost 10 megawatts.
Wow.
And they can configure those things so that they can be combined heat and power. But the problem is this: if you're just buying electricity, you can get it for about $1 a watt. But if you're, or less, but if you're buying it as combined heat and power, you'd better be prepared to spend 3 times that amount. Okay, and the reason, of course, is because you've got infrastructure you've got to develop infrastructure for delivering heat, which as a fluid running through pipes is expensive, but as electricity just running through the lines is an inexpensive way of doing things.
Speaking of electricity, how much electricity does it consume? We're talking about putting solar to power it.
Right. So
how feasible is that?
Yeah, so when you think about solar and heat pumps, you're pretty much talking about a grid-tied system. Most people are. So what that means is you produce power, throughout the summer and during the day, and then it goes into the grid, spins your meter backwards, and then you draw from it, obviously later in the year when you're running your heat pump or your lights at night.
Okay.
Right? So
it's like banking it.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. You're banking power in the grid, and then you're drawing it out later when it's cold and windy and dark. So the amount of electricity the heat pump's going to use is, as you might imagine, is directly proportional to the amount of heat you need. So what we said before is it's a third the cost of oil or propane, sort of roughly. So what that means is if you're displacing 500 gallons of oil, let's say you were paying $4 a gallon, that would cost you $2,000 a year, right? So with a heat pump, your cost would be somewhere in the range of $650, $700 for the electricity to run that.
That wasn't what I was thinking of. I mean, how many watts is it going to take just to run it?
You mean instantaneously?
Yeah.
Okay. So
the amount of heat it's generating is going to be time dependent, not wattage dependent.
Partially true. It actually is wattage dependent.
The hotter it grows, the more heat.
So when you think about this gets somewhat complex, but a heat pump's efficiency, the amount of energy it delivers, is fundamentally affected by the temperature differential. So the temperature inside versus the temperature outside. So a heat pump, though, is also variable speed. So it's inverter driven. So a heat pump can ramp from sort of 10%, 20% capacity up to 100% capacity, just like your car. You can drive your car at 1 mile an hour, you can drive it at 100 miles an hour, perhaps.
So it can do it rather rapidly.
Oh yeah, I mean it can. It's an electric
But it
motor.
means that if this is drawing a maximum of 1,000 watts, it could be drawing 100 watts and producing heat.
Absolutely, it's variable speed. So this is a really important distinction compared to heat pumps in the past. And one of the reasons they're so much more efficient now is they're inverter driven, which means that if it's, say, 50 degrees outside, you don't have much heating load, right? You just need a little bit of heat. The heat pump won't turn on and off. It will bring the room to temperature, and then it will ramp itself down to the minimum, speed it needs to keep the room at the right temperature. And then if the temperature drops, it'll move its speed up a little. And if the temperature comes back up, it'll move its speed down
Which
again.
means you've got much more even heating too.
Exactly. So what it's doing is it's not like your oil furnace where it's on or it's off. This is a continuous operation. And so by doing that, it's much more efficient. And so you asked how much it draws. It's 0 to, for a large unit, it might be up to close to 3,000 watts at its total peak.
I didn't anticipate it worked that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty complex device when you get inside of it. The other thing, and this is a little counterintuitive, with this sort of heat pump, with a variable speed heat pump, you don't necessarily want to set the temperature back a lot. What you want to do is you set it at the temperature you want for the house, and you just let it run. Now, if you're going on vacation, you can set it back. But the reason I say not to set it back is because you've got that oil or propane or something sitting in the background, and you want to use this as your primary and the oil or propane as your backup. So you don't want to let this thing, set this to 60 and have your oil kick on,
Yeah.
right? So you can set it back, but you have to be very conscious that you want this to be your primary.
So if you were going to set this down, it might be wise to set your
You would want to
propane
set
to
both of them back.
40 degrees or something, so that it would
Right.
only come on by itself in a real emergency.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. And for people who are really sort of energy nerds, another thing to think about is, because this is a variable speed unit and you have a fixed size to the exterior heat exchanger and the interior heat exchanger, this unit actually will operate at its maximum efficiency at sort of its mid-level of capacity, which when you think about it is actually similar to a car. You're going to get terrible fuel mileage in your car going 1 mile an hour, and you're going to get bad fuel mileage going 100 miles an hour.
Terrible, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. But if you're going sort of 50 on the highway, you're going to get very good fuel mileage.
Yep.
So these units, if you set it way back and then you try to bring the temperature up, it's going to try to do that as fast as it can. It's going to run at 100% capacity, and it's going to be less efficient. So the savings you get from setting it back are not as much as the savings you would get from setting an oil or a propane furnace back.
So it takes a different mindset.
It does.
Slightly different.
And this is kind of on the margin. These are little
Yeah.
things, right? You can just, if you want to, you just set it and you leave it.
Yeah.
But it is slightly different than an oil and a propane
Yeah,
furnace.
I used to drive a Prius, and the Prius had that same kind of thing, because I could be very conscious of my gas mileage on a constant basis.
Sure, they make it very easy to do that.
They
in
make it
Prius.
easy to do that.
Yeah.
And, I knew that my best gas mileage was at 46 miles an hour.
So you were driving 46,
Yeah.
and at 50, people were honking at you. You were driving 46 or 35, and cops pull you over.
For example, if I had to go to the airport, I'd go down Route 5 instead of going down Route 91, because I know that I'd get better gas mileage. Aside from the fact that it was more comfortable to drive
46.
on a road that didn't have a lot of traffic on it, and it would take 10 or 20 minutes longer, but so what?
Yeah.
And sometimes it took less time. But I think the point is that, I learned early on that, going 10 miles an hour, going 20 miles an hour, going 30 miles an hour, that thing didn't have a transmission.
Right.
It had a variable drive.
Yeah.
But even so, you didn't get good mileage when the speed was low.
Yep.
And of course, the mileage just went down precipitously when you got
With
over
speed.
60 miles an hour.
It's a squared function.
Yes, it is. Actually, I think it might be a
Cubic.
cube function. Yeah. And
Aerodynamic drag.
It's
It's
aerodynamic drive.
Yeah.
It's cubic, and it's bizarre, but yeah.
Yep.
It works out. And of course, with a thing like this, I would expect, now that you've explained it, I don't know how an inverter is involved in this. Saying that it's driven by an inverter, he might know. I don't know.
Not as I comprehended inverter. I mean, just something
DC
turns
DC
into
motor.
AC.
Yeah, so
It's a DC motor.
yeah.
Okay.
Because a DC motor is much
Rectifier there,
much
not an
easier.
inverter.
They-
The opposite.
Yeah,
Okay.
AC to DC.
Yeah, so it runs on DC.
Runs
So,
on DC.
It's just
Interesting.
easier to control the speed.
I wonder if it would make sense to,
control standpoint.
bypass AC altogether and go straight from batteries to running these things and have it solar, battery, and heat pump.
I have seen a model that can be powered directly by solar,
Yes?
but it's designed for air conditioning.
Uh-huh.
Because if you think about it, your peak heating load doesn't correspond particularly well with your peak solar.
Yes.
Production.
But on the other hand, you know, Nancy Ray Mallory, who is
Mm-hmm.
who is the editor of Green
Yep.
Energy Times, is off-grid.
Yep.
She got into, you know, she bought a house, or she didn't buy the house, she bought the land and built the house, and she had it built very efficiently. And she knew when she got out there that it was going to be a bit of a problem for electricity because she was rather far from the grid
Yeah.
connection. And so she found out very quickly that she could get a really nice off-grid solar system for $35,000, or she could get a grid connection for $35,000.
It's an easy decision.
It's
Yeah.
an easy decision. But she became, and she wanted to go off grid anyway, but she wouldn't have bought the property, I don't think, without having that desire. But you know, it's one of those things where she told me her system can deliver 12 kilowatt hours a day, and she uses typically 3.5.
Wow.
She's got a lot of extra there.
She needs some heat pumps, so
Yeah.
she needs to use that
Yeah, well,
energy.
she was thinking of getting a heat pump.
She should call 802-451-0173.
But the problem is, she's not in Brattleboro. She's not
That's right.
even near Brattleboro.
No, she's far.
quite a ways away.
Yeah.
Okay, too far.
I was talking with it about
Bradford.
this already.
Yeah,
We already talked through it with her.
yeah, okay. But, you know, I mean, you could probably sell it to her and do it as a representative of somebody and get a commission.
Well, we're focused on Brattleboro for now.
Yeah,
We want to. Our focus is really to get to 25 so we can make this
Yeah.
successful.
Okay. So I think, has everybody got a clear image of what this is all about? It's about saving money. It's about saving energy. It's about not having a lot of emissions that you might have if you're trying to heat with a air-starved old cordwood stove.
Finding alternative form of exercise other than
It's a
chopping
great
wood.
alternative form of exercise, but man, I'll tell you, those things really were polluters.
Sure.
You know, if you see smoke coming out, you're polluting.
Yeah.
And these things, the way it works is that in Vermont you can get 100% solar power even if you live in an apartment.
Yeah.
And,
That's right.
You know, and you could run one of these things 100% solar power because you're doing it by banking your solar during the summer and drawing it during the winter. And Green Mountain Power should be allowed to make $1 here or there. You know,
The grid needs to be there.
the grid needs to be there. Yeah, at least
That's
for
a
now.
fact.
Yeah, at least for now.
Well, it's convenient.
The grid is convenient.
It's nice to be able to turn the lights on when you get home.
Absolutely.
And gentlemen, we're at the end of an
I
hour.
think we are.
All right.
Great.
Great.
So
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. I hope this works out for you.
We hope so too. Help us, Brattleboro.
We hope it works out for everybody.
Yeah. We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. And you know, we went to the parade, and they had French cavalrymen wearing Romanesque helmets and brass breastplates. You can just imagine what these things were polished like, with high-stepping horses. And they had helicopters that had jet engines on the ends of the rotors. Can you imagine how much noise those made? Flying over, it was one of the most impressive things I ever saw. And it was the best parade by far until I saw strolling heifers.
That's the moral.
That's quite an endorsement.
Wow.
It is a fun event. We should be talking about it. Where were we with
So
Should we tell people how to get them? We'll go ahead.
What I was going to say,